All right, we're back from our break, and I managed to kind of shift working environments. And fortunately, because of the way I have Eclipse set up, which is a portable version of Eclipse, the one that I recommend that you download with all the effects stuff built into it, it was a pretty easy transition to a different machine. I did fire up my VPN, and you're seeing some console messages down here, but my VPN is connected right now, and I'm going to go ahead and initiate the application just to show you what happens. And you notice in the console, I get the driver loaded message showing that it is loading the driver just fine, but it's not talking to the database. And that could be for a number of different reasons, by the way. And then you'll also notice up here in the application that the status message is showing as well that says database connection failed. Is your VPN active? Or it could be username or password too. And in my case, I think that's more of what it is. So I'm going to close the application. And I'm just going to go through a browser now and connect to Apollo and to PHP, my admin, just to check. So I'm going to log in here. And I'm going to find my account. And, the problem that I get often is that I create multiple versions of these, semester to semester. And right, okay, so it does have a Java 2 database, but you guys notice as I click on it, there's nothing in there. That's not a really good recipe for success, by the way. And I think what I must have done is I must have put it in my other account, or who knows, but I'm not really too worried about that. I'm just going to use my regular Java book account, and I am connecting to the staff table. So I'm just going to look, I just want to make sure that the stuff I'm connecting to is right. And so I'm just looking at the stuff here. There seems to be a staff table. The regular Java book should be fine. So I'm going to go back to my code now, and knowing that, I'm going to change this entry now to just say Java book. Now this should work, right? So the reason it wasn't working before is there was nothing to talk to. There's no tables or anything like that. So let's see if this fixes it. So we're going to save this, and we're going to run it again. Database connected. Great, great sign. Now let's take it a step further. The way that this thing is supposed to work in the long run, if you look at the book, is that you would type in an ID here if I wanted to look it up, and I would do view, and it would pop up. Now I noticed in my browser that I have stuff in there, and I have very clever IDs, 11111 and 22222. See how clever I get with those? And so if I was to type that in right now and hit view, of course nothing happens. And the why behind that is because there's no code behind the view button. It's just really as simple as that. So our job now is to start making things happen. And this is where I think it gets really fun. And by the way, powerful, folks. So back over to Eclipse, and let's get coding on this. So the next part that we're going to work on is we're going to work on the view first. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing that we want to do is, if we're trying to pull stuff out of a database, is we want to write the SQL statement that's going to do that. And if we're going to pull back an entry, how are we going to do that? Well, normally what we'd want to do is what I just explained. We would pull up that form. In the ID field, we would type the number ID that we're looking for, and we hit the view button, it would find it. So in order to write a query that would do that in SQL, we might write something to the effect of, and I know this is not a SQL editor here, but we'd write something like this: select everything from the staff table where the ID number equals, whatever we're looking for. Now, the trick here for us is, how do we tell it whatever we're looking for in that spot? Okay. And then more importantly, this is a whole SQL statement. Well, we can't operate SQL statements natively inside of Java, but if we put it inside of double quotes and make it a string, then we get to the point where we can feed that into a variable, and then take that variable and feed it into the statement, and then send that statement to the server and run it. Okay. And I know that's a little complicated to explain, but I'm basically going to set up a string variable here just to hold this, and I'm just going to call it query because you know what, that's what it is. All right, and we'll put our semicolon at the end. But I, more importantly, want to put inside those single quotes there my criteria for searching. And it gets a little bit weird. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go to that field that holds our search. And if you think about how that was laid out, that would be the text box that holds the text that we're typing in for the ID, which happens to be named txt ID. So I'm just going to copy that and come back down here, wherever view is, there it is. And then inside those single quotes, I want to do that. But here's, I can't just paste that in because then it comes in as text. What I really have to do is kind of split the statement. And this is the spot where most people will fumble a little bit with doing this in Java, because as you build these statements, you're kind of jumping into a string and then out of a string, and we're concocting it as we go. So we're creating these, shorter strings. We're going to concatenate the text that comes from the form, and then we're going to close it with a single apostrophe. But that has to be inside of double quotes because it's part of the original statement, if you see what I mean. So now I'm going to take the name of that text field, paste it in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this really simple method called GetText that we have used before, which pulls the text back from the field. Now, good programmers will tell you that it's never, ever safe to grab stuff from a form without doing a little bit of preliminary rudimentary validation of sorts. And one habit that a lot of us have is when we're using a keyboard, we'll type a name, and then what does your hand automatically do after you type something? You hit space or you hit enter, right? And so it's really common when people fill out forms to add extraneous spaces to the form entry. So they might type like the 11111 and space and then hit the button. And we're going to add a method to our command which will get the text from that field, but also check for leading and trailing spaces and eliminate them, realizing that that's one way that this might make the program fail, is if people are hitting spaces by mistake, not recognizing it. And the problem with spaces is you can type them in, you don't see them on the screen, right? And so this helps us to kind of eliminate that problem. But notice the anatomy here of the statement. So we have a regular SQL statement where normally we would put in this spot here, what I've highlighted, like the number that we're looking for, right? But we want it to be dynamic, so we're getting it from the form, we're concatenating it into our phrase. So it'll grab it from the form, put it into the string, store it in a variable, and now we can run it. All right, so first step, try and catch. And why do we do a try and catch? Because we are dealing with an external resource, folks, that could fail. And so you have to put in exception handling or a try catch to kind of deal with it. So I'm kind of just being preemptive here, and I'm just using kind of my standard thing. However, this is really a database exception, so there's a special category of exceptions just for that. So we are putting in a SQL exception, and yes, it does require its own library. Did I misspell that or something? Sure, like the exception one just fine. Well, I'm going to leave it like this for right now, and we'll see if it causes me a problem later. That should be correct. All right. Anyhow, now we are going to be pulling back results. And if you remember how we did it here, we used a thing called a result set, and then a statement to execute a query. And we're basically going to do the same thing here. In fact, if you wanted, we could just copy that, bring it over, and tweak it. And I am going to tweak it probably a little bit more than a little. I'm going to shorten this name for starters. I'm just going to call it RS to match up with my previous code. I also know that my statement isn't spelled exactly how I have it up above in the global variable. And so I'm just fixing that so it matches. And then we're going to execute the query, but this time it'll be so much easier to execute the query because we're not building it in to the statement directly. In fact, what we're doing instead is we're just going to feed in the variable that we just populated above. Okay. The other thing that we're going to do then is once we get that query back, now there's some work to do, right? Now we have to create some output to put on the screen, and how are we going to put it on the screen? Now, whatever we do inside that interface, if you think about how the book laid it all out, we're always going to be populating the same boxes. We're always going to be putting information in: ID, name, first, last, middle, address, city, state, phone, and email. And because that process is repetitive, regardless which one of these actions we take, it makes a whole lot of sense to create another method just to populate the form. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one called Load Fields. And we are going to pass to it the result set that comes back from the database, and we're going to let that method handle it. Now, one of the clever things about doing this, like this, is the fact that it's recognizing what kind of thing I'm passing into it, and then it's going to build me a method automatically that works with it. However, I'm going to caution you on actually throwing a SQL exception here. So you want to throw this into. And I'm thinking this is what takes care of my catch. See, did you see how the underline went away, folks? All right. Now we got to think about what happens in this scenario. So in this scenario, we got a whole bunch of data coming back. It should hypothetically be one entry for this, right? Because you're looking up one ID number. And then we got to take whatever comes from a certain field and put it back into the same field on the screen. Or whatever column from the table it comes from, then put it on the right field on the screen. So we start by actually doing this with an if statement. And the reason we do this is if there are no results. So let's say you do the search and it doesn't come back with anything, it shouldn't load anything, right? So we're going to just check to see if the result set has a next item or basically anything in it. Is really what that says. Then let's go ahead and do that. And so this is going to be a methodical process of building it. So what we'll do is we'll just take each field one at a time. And I'm going to say for the text field, last name, set the text in the field to the result set's get string. So we're going to pull the string, but from which result? And what we're going to do here is we're going to pull back the column index of the item that we hope to get. Now this is where PHPMyAdmin comes in handy, because as you notice here, the last name, which is the field I'm pulling in first, is actually the second column, right? It's not the first column, it's the second column. So what I'm going to put in here is the column index is 2. All right. Now, as we did that, you can now start to extrapolate that all the others will be kind of systematically following. So first name will get column 3. Middle initial will get column 4, and so on. So what I'm going to do here is just to kind of speed things up is I'm just going to paste them all in. And yes, I'm going to share the code with you, so don't freak out. Here we are. Question. Yes.
So it doesn't do the 0, 1, 2, 3. It actually starts with 1.
Yeah, this is one of those weird anomalous things, Jay. Right. And I had the same exact question when I first did this. I'm like, that makes no sense. It should be 0. This should be 1, not 2. But what happens is the result set also has its own ID field that's obscured from us when it comes back. So it kind of internally is tracking it. So the ID field is 1 and last name is 2. And the internal one that we don't see is actually 0. Isn't that weird?
So weird, but it makes sense.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm going to do here also is I'm just going to be polite to our user and just put a little message up on the status field, record found. So if it finds something, it's going to populate it and it's going to say, hey, we found it. Here it is. Here you go. Right. And then what happens if it doesn't find it? Well, let's just be polite and at least give them an else and put in a little message that says, hey, you know what? Sorry, record not found. All right. So that's load fields. Now I'm going to paste these into CodeShare together, but I'm not quite done yet because what I really do want to do is up here give these messages to both our user and our console. Now, the thing I think that's really interesting about writing to the console, and I want you guys to think about this for a sec, is when you write to the console, you know, only the admins can see it. But when you think about a server that keeps logs, right? And this, and if you guys aren't aware of this, right? Anytime you have a server that you're logging into or hitting a web page from, or running an application or talking to the database, those servers keep logs of all the transactions. And really what we're doing with the system out print line, okay, granted, we're writing to the console so we can see it. We could just as easily be writing to a text file, or appending, really is what it would be, appending to a text file that would then keep a transactional record of every interaction with the database. And it sounds really goofy, but that's how real applications are written. Now, why do we do that? Because it's really easy to track down problems that way. Hey, look, they connected. The driver loaded, they didn't connect to the database. Their VPN must not have been working. Or here it says, you know, username is wrong. You know, whatever it is, that's the way we build log files. So instead of system out print lines, it could be writing to a text file. So if you think of that. All right, so what we're putting in a couple of messages here, just in case. I am now going to paste in the view code and load fields directly into CodeShare. Get your copy paste fingers ready here. And I guess I have to load CodeShare before we can go to it. There we go. So I'm blowing away what's here, by the way. Or actually, you know what? I'll just put it at the bottom. There it is. There's view and load fields. You guys waste no time. All right. I'm going to go back now to the application. And you know what? We should be able to run this now, and it should work. We ran it last time. It did connect to the database successfully. So at this point, we should be able to go in there and pull data back. I'm going to look at PHP My Admin really quick and just refresh my memory. I have two different users, one with 4 1s and one with 4 2s. So I can look up both of those and see if it works. And if it does, huge success. Remember, VPN has to be connected. So here we go. Hitting that play button, saving our work. There's our interface. Database is connected. Good sign. The console says so. Driver loaded, database connected. All right, so now we're going to type in that first ID. 4 1s, and I'm going to hit my view button. Yay, it worked. And I'm hoping it's working for you. I'm going to type in my other user. All 2s. Hit view. That seemed to work too. Let's type in my other user. That doesn't exist on purpose, of course. Let's hit view. Okay, record not found. Now, I could argue that if I do a lookup and it doesn't find it, I could, and you could take it this far if you want. If it doesn't find something, you could take all of these and set all the fields to blank. In fact, it's so darn easy to do. Why don't I just do it? Just to show you, you know, like when you start seeing how it's done, all of these values here can just be switched to a pair of double quotes. In fact, I'm going to get lazy here and just paste them, right? Because if it's not finding it, why should you be looking at the old data? I mean, that's kind of my thinking. And once you have the methodology for reading the information from the fields and writing back to the fields, you see it's pretty easy, right? But conceptually powerful, very, very powerful. All right, we're going to save this. All right, and I know you guys, what you guys are going to ask next. Can you put that in the CodeShare? Sure. Let's put it in the CodeShare. We don't want the poor little students to be typing too much all night. I say that with a lot of humor. But I'm also doing it because we want to move fast. So, all right, let's go ahead and run this. And I just want to show you, we'll find one that we know we can find. Excellent. Then we'll look for one that we know we don't have. And now it's blank. Okay. Now, if you wanted, you can get, you know, fancier with your little message here. You could do pop-ups for it. You can make a big red box. You can make the text red, whatever you want to do. You can do it any way you want. I think that what might be a little bit more effective than this is maybe if this was moved over to the right-hand side up here. I'm just talking about interface things now, and maybe bold and red might be a little bit more effective. But you know what? You can always clean these things up in the aftermath, folks. But the fact is, one of the methods is working, 3 more to write. Now, in my mind, when I build applications, what I often do first is I go for low-hanging fruit. And I want you to think about that for a second. I try to finish all the parts that are really easy to finish and then save the hard parts for last, because when you start to do that, you start to realize that there's not really that much to do here. I know how to do 95% of it. It's just that 5% I really have to figure out. And then get the easy stuff out of the way, and you feel really encouraged to get the other stuff done. And now that we have this first method working, the rest of it is going to be pretty easy. But when I think about these methods that we have to build, and notice these aren't even in the right order. To me, it seems like the easiest one to create is probably clear, right? Because what would clear do? Well, it would clear the form. Hey, didn't we just kind of do that? You guys see where I'm going with this? Yeah. So, hey, if we can write a method to clear the screen, that would be really, really easy to write. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's write a clear. And instead of going through the whole rigmarole of talking our way through it, I'm just going to paste it right in, folks. Because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through each one of the fields and just null them out. Okay, could I use double quotes? Sure. Is there a difference between an empty string and a null?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely there is. Null is the absence of something. A string that's empty is a string that's empty. That's not really a good. I know it's goofy, right? Doesn't make any sense, but that's how it works, folks. So we just add another one in. You know what? Let's go ahead, save this, run it, and test it. And this is really the approach I recommend that you use. So load up one that you know that works, and now hit the clear button. All right, that was a piece of cake. All right, 2 buttons left to go. See how fast that goes?
To find out my staff directory, like the staff table in the database, is completely empty.
Yeah, mine also.
I was like, oh wait, I can't pull anything up now.
Well, that's a really good point. I'm so glad that you said that. I'm going to add this method to the bottom here so you guys can grab it. But I'm so glad that you said that, because I forgot so much that the staff table starts out empty. It's expecting you to create an entry. Now, if you want,
so that wasn't just me that had it empty.
Not.
Okay.
But if you want, you could actually create an entry from here if you wanted to.
Now, right. I just didn't know what I thought something was wrong with mine.
Yeah, and this isn't really a good example, but you can actually create an entry. And I'm trying to remember how you do that here. How do you add a record? Does anybody see the button that I'm missing?
Insert, maybe.
Yeah, where's the insert?
At the top, it's one of the tabs. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I went straight for the sequel button. I was like, wait.
Yeah, and so what you can do is you can just come in here, and in this column here, you can just start creating, see my favorites, ASDF and Smith.
I mean, it works.
Hey, whatever it takes, really. Wait, middle initial should only be 1 letter, right? All right. And then once you've filled in one of those fields, you just come down here and hit that go button. And notice how it turns it into a SQL statement for you. Isn't that awesome cool? You just hit the go button and, we already did it. But it just shows you the output of the query statement. It helps you to write the query. If I go back to the staff table now, that entry should be there. So now I have another person I can look up. So you guys can do that in PHP My Admin to add your own records. When we get the app fully running, though, you'll be able to put in your own. See, and that's the next step. So let's go to the next major one to do here, which is to do insert. Insert's probably the trickiest one out of all of them to write. But I'm going to show you actually, it's not as bad as you might think. So we're going to start with the same approach we used here, which is to create a string called, well, let's not call it the same thing. In fact, it might even be a better habit to call it by a separate name. So I'm just trying to follow good practice here. And then really what we have to do is create a string that has all the stuff in it that we need. Now, if only it could be so simple, but this approach that we use here to get text, right? If we're inserting a record, it's assuming that for each field, we are inserting a record. Now, one of the reasons I was so excited to come in here and insert a record, in fact, I should have kept it up on the screen, so now I'm going to create another one. This time I'll try to be a little bit more serious about it. Slightly more serious. Put in stuff that almost looks real. And now I'm going to actually, noticing that that's not accurate there. I'm going to hit the go button, and then I'm going to take a look at this little insert statement here. I'm going to copy it. You know, real frankly, you know, why should I reinvent the wheel? Here's a query all set to go, right? It's got the right syntax that works with this database. All I have to do is copy it. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to bring that over to Eclipse. And yes, I'm going to paste it in here. I realize that this might cause some problems. So I'm going to be preemptive and set up a comment structure to hold it so I don't get errors. And yes, it's going way off the side of the screen. So let's truncate it a little bit. Now, as we write this query, we have to insert in much the same way that we did here into the staff table. So that's the SQL command. So some of you know your SQL. Some of you are learning it right now. Some of you haven't taken it yet. But basically what we're doing is we run the SQL command that says insert into, which table are you inserting a record into? And we're inserting it into staff. And then in the order that the database prefers it, ID, last name, first name, etc., these values, and then in these spots is where we're going to do this for each field. And we're going to lay it out in a systematic way. Now, there's a lot of issues with the copy and paste I just did. And they're so numerous, I don't even know where to begin. The first one I noticed is that the single quotes here are slanted single quotes. They are different than those single quotes. All right. And that's a problem. Now, more interestingly, when you write a real SQL statement, you kind of don't even need to have those in. That's just what MySQL did. But you can actually write it like this without those single quotes. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of do that a little bit here and kind of do a little cleanup first. All right, so now that I got those cleaned up, now I'm going to start to think about this other piece. Now, interestingly, up until this point, in fact, really up until that point where that single quote is, I'm actually okay. So I'm going to copy this parts of this into this statement up here and start to build it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, let's just go up through here. So I'm going to cut this and put it inside my double quotes. And you know what? I know the lines are going to get long, which is why I'm doing this, by the way. And so now I'm going to concatenate on the next line. And I'm trying to be kind of strategic about this, you know, both with screen space, you know, frankly, and readability is kind of like a dual concern here. And so I want to get the rest of this statement in there. And I'm going to go all the way up to values single quote is what I'm cutting. And I'm going to paste that right here. Now, I want you to notice how messy that paste was. That was not a pretty paste. I'm trying to figure out why. Let's just paste it here. Interesting. Oh, I guess that's how it was. That explains it. All right, so let's do a preliminary cut paste. I don't know why my mind was not seeing that it was on a separate line. All right, and so that's the next part of our statement. And I just want you to notice here that before I can do this technique, I have to escape out with a double quote. So I have to close that statement, and I can probably get one statement in place here. So I'm going to copy this first one, and let's just do a Control C, and we'll concatenate it on. But we know we got to change it. In the case of the first one, the ID is going to work because we are retrieving the ID first, so that's okay. Our statement is not done though yet. We need to get the next piece of information. But here's where it gets really goofy. So I have a single quote here, and I'm supposed to get some text from the screen and put it in here and close the single quote. Notice I didn't close it up here. I'm actually going to close it down here, and I'm going to begin my line then. Now I have to open up a new string, so a double quote, put a single quote inside of it to finally close the previous query, put in a comma to close that, and then start the next one like that, which will read and then last name. And so what will happen is I'm going to concatenate to this all of this, and then move to the next line and do the same thing again. So this pattern starts to repeat. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste it in, but this time I'm going to get first name, right? And then you go on to the next line and the next line and the next line, and it ends up looking like this ultimately. And I'm going to delete that semicolon because I'm going to paste it in. But this is what the statement looks like. And I noticed that, I wasn't very consistent in my formatting. It might even be better to do that, just separate everything out. But I get all the fields read in. I have all the correct punctuation marks. Notice none of those punctuation marks are slanted. And that's a problem when you copy and paste from external sources, by the way, folks. So like what you see on screen is not always an actual coding character. Very, very, very notorious for single quotes and double quotes in coding engines. And the other bizarre part of this is how the statement closes. So the statement closes, right? And then a semicolon to close the SQL statement, close that inside of the string, and then close the Java statement. So this one goes with the SQL statement, this one goes with the Java statement, and yeah, you have to do all that to make it work. But that's the statement. The next thing that we're going to do is, now that we have the information or the query set up to pull the stuff from the form that you just typed in, now we have to interface with the database. So here's where we're going to do our try catch. So we're going to do a try. We're going to come in here right away and do a catch with parens, once again with curly brackets, we're just setting up the structure. We know we're going to probably be throwing a SQL exception here, and let's just kind of name it the same way. And I think last time I did lowercase, I'm not really sure why. But in order to actually run the query now, we will call upon the statement. So it's ready. Then we will send a message to the user, assuming that it worked, right? Because if the try works, they'll see this stuff. If it doesn't, the catch will kick in. And for the catch, I'm just going to have these simple messages to the console and to the user that the insert failed with the error code. Now, I'm not always a huge fan of sending error codes to the user, but in this case, I might say something like, hey, you try to put a number or more than one character in the middle initial field or something weird like that. All right, so this is the whole insert statement. I'm going to paste this into CodeShare really quick for all y'all. Put it down here at the bottom. And then I wish you good luck. Now let's see if this works, right? That's really the proof in the pudding here. So let's launch our application. We have it up on screen. Let's retrieve a couple because I just added a few things. I think I also put in a 555. Did I? Nope, I did not. So you know what? I can create one. Well, 555 is already on the screen. May as well leave it there. Let's come up with something. Who should we put in here? Could be anybody. Does Jean-Luc have a middle initial? I'm not really sure.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I don't know where he lives. 1234 Street. I don't know. Whatever. He lives somewhere in France, though, right? He lives in France. He lives in France, Wisconsin. We just invented a town. And then
there is a Paris, Wisconsin.
Well, there you go. That must be it.
La Bear, France.
Thank you for looking it up. I appreciate your sincere efforts. All right, I'm hitting insert. All right, and it said inserted record successfully. Now, I might argue that after you insert it, maybe the screen should change or something. But let's go ahead and clear this, right? And now we can search for it with view. And there it is. So we're able to write to the database and pull it back. And we can prove that we wrote to the database by going to phpMyAdmin and looking at the table and seeing that it arrived there. Now, that is really cool, folks, because here you are sitting on your own computer, VPN to school, talking to a database and inserting information into that database. And then pulling it back also. Super powerful. Last method we have to write is update. So this one is kind of a amalgamation, I guess, of insert in a way and display, right? In a sense. To make this go as fast as possible, because I am looking at the clock going, oh my God, class is already over. I'm just going to paste this one in because that's the kind of time that we have here. So I'm going to find wherever my stub is for update. I'm just going to paste over it. And yes, panic not. It's going into CodeShare. There's update. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this. Probably the most significant difference here, notice that the technique is very similar. The SQL statement is slightly different because we're not creating a new record. We're updating an existing one. So the thought is you pull one up. Maybe you change the phone number or email and then hit update and that saves into the database. So that's what we're going to try. Otherwise, that'll be the whole application, believe it or not. So let's go ahead and run this. And let's pull back that record that we just created. And let's say that we don't know Jean-Luc's middle initial. Maybe he doesn't have one. Let's just get rid of it. And then maybe we can get his address correct. Let's have some fun with this. And his actual email address is jlpicard@starfleet. Actually, would it be mil or org? Well, let's call it org. All right. So we're going to
start command.
Yeah. Update. All right. Let's clear the form. Let's type in that search again. And let's do a view. And now you can see middle initial is gone. Email address is updated. And the street is updated too. So that's a complete working application, folks. And as is customary for me here, let's go through all the code. So this is the top part of the code through line 32, let's call it, through line 62, through line 92, through line 122, through line 153, and then finally, and then the rest. All right, so that's the complete
20
application.
lines of code.
Yeah, it is a lot of code. It ends, you know, it becomes very simple to write a lot of code. And now think about what we just did. The background actions are what's powerful, but we've also integrated SQL code into a Java application, talk to a remote database. Your next assignment, of course, is very similar to this. So if you look in the book, and if I remember correctly, I do have videos recorded on this. Unfortunately, we are out of time here today. I'm going to end the recording here.